participation from the audience, some raising of hands, nothing too extravagant. So just feel free to engage and be part of the talk. At some point toward the end, I will come around with this very same microphone and invite you to be part of the conversation and bring on your questions. So got a great panel of experts here. And but as you can see up there, we've got, I can't really see it, so I'll do it down here. We've got George Warben, who is Director of Automation for Vantedge Medical. George is in the middle. Dan Buttermore is on the far right. He's Vice President of Engineering at Vantedge Medical. And Adam Dunkey Jacobs is Executive Director and Site Lead of Teleflex. Was that good? Did I say that right? All right, fantastic. All right. I realized I hadn't reviewed that with you. It's always a moment of panic when you look at the name. You're like, oh gosh, I didn't do that. As someone with the weird sounding name, I'm very sympathetic. So I think with that, I'm going to hand the controls over to George, right?
Yes, sir.
Take it away.
Sir, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for sitting here and listening through one of my favorite subjects, automation. So I think all of us, kind of have on our own mind what automation means, right? A lot of us go to Skynet and, a lot of stuff we see in the movies, but it's much more simpler than that in our facilities and what we do here at Vantedge Medical. So we look at defining what the role of automation is. So what that entails at Vantedge is I've got a 10-member team of engineers and technicians that walk through the idea of what it's going to take to improve that process. So where there's a planning process phase that walks us through first, that enables us to evaluate what that process is and how to implement the next steps within that process itself. Then once that's established, then we can roll into what's the throughput look like on that. So we look at the plan, the action, and the results. So what does that look like as far as automation and the maturity as we move through? And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look because that's a fast finger that works on this clicker here. So the automation journey, what does that look like, right? So first we get into, we've got a manual process. We've established this, we've got it in our manufacturing facility for our customers, and what does that look like in that role? The next step is we've got that optimized, we're looking at what that is. Now, how can we optimize that to the next step of getting it into an assisted role? So we look at, do we manage it with hard automation? Do we look at what, what robotics can do to help us out? So there's more of that planning stage that my team comes into with me to evaluate where we can be value added in that process itself. The next state then becomes, now I've got this process and this cell developed, how can I integrate that into the production planning and the role next that we're going to need? So these three steps are a common platform that a majority of us deal with every day within manufacturing. MedTech is especially important because of the high-end quality that we need, the on-time deliveries, and all that aspects that enable us to collaborate well with our customers and be able to produce what they need when they need it. So with that integration, now we can take some data that we've got within those cells and we can roll that up into an ERP system or an MES. That rolls us into the next stage of Industry 4.0, and we'll get deeper into these two roles later on in the presentation. But now we take this cell, this production system that we have, we work to optimize it, we work to make it intelligent. That enables us to bring in, our favorite word that we hear nowadays, AI. Let's bring in that so we can see where we want to go next and how we want to try and do this in a much more efficient and faster way. So again, we can ebb and flow with our customers as their demands change in the ever-changing market. Sorry. Dan.
Good. The next one. No, you're good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming through. Before we keep going, we kind of want to get an idea from the audience for where everybody sits with their automation journey. We also want to hear from Adam for what he personally looks for, what Teleflex looks for. So if George pops to the next slide, we'll kind of go through these 5 stages as we've defined them. I have to point it that way. So how many people work in a facility where you're primarily doing manufacturing, or your company is primarily doing manufacturing? You have a bunch of manual operations. So raise your hand out there. Okay, so about half directly involved. How many people, if you have that, probably have some sort of assisted automation going on in your factories as well? Right, because if you have manual, you probably have some sort of automation. Next one would be integrated. So when I think integrated, I think of what it would have been considered world-class probably 5-10 years ago, where you walk in and 50% or more of what you're doing is cellular automation, all the way through start to finish. How many people would say the majority of what you're doing is fully automated from start to finish through that? Yeah, probably us neither. Hands start to be like, not so much. And we'll talk about why that obviously doesn't make sense. And since not a lot of hands went up, ours wouldn't either for how many people are nailing Industry 4.0. Like, no, not, we're getting there, right? It's a journey. And that's really what we're talking through as we go through this as well. So Adam, in your perspective, what would you look for from typical partners in this journey as your products kind of dictate that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to the component itself, right? So we all know that, so I'm coming from the med device side of things, not the manufacturing, but we have certain components that are super critical and we have to control very tightly. And we have other components that, for whatever reason, we were able to have large tolerances and things like that. So it depends on the component itself. I know that in the case of Teleflex, we actually started working with Vantedge when we were previous to being acquired by Teleflex, or a company called Standard Bariatrics, and make our anvil component for a surgical stapler. And that particular component is extremely delicate and needs the precision. So we approached Hobson Mott's Vantedge at the time, and we were really looking for something that could be a fully validatable process. So what that translates to us is quality, consistency, and obviously there's an investment up front in implementing that automation, but the benefit on the back end is I get a consistent part from the supplier every time. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we'll talk about current state across MedTech, and this was a survey done a couple years ago from National, sorry, I had it in front of me, the National Association of Manufacturers. Essentially what they found, and this isn't a surprise to anybody who's tried to hire, it's not just a shortage of highly skilled, highly paid, 20, 30-year-old senior machinist, or 23 years of experience senior machinist. It's across the board. And they're projecting 2 million open jobs by 2030, and that's even high-paid entry-level positions. Not surprisingly, automation, they're like, yeah, there's a lot of it out there. Almost everybody's doing some form, fit, or function of automation. But what they found was a lot of those systems were single point, solved a single problem solutions that were implemented, not part of a holistic mindset or a system put there. And I don't know if anybody's a Stephen Covey fan, 7 Habits Highly Effective People. If you go through those, habit 2 is one grin, maybe a little bit. Yeah. It's what? Begin with the end in mind. And I love that in the personal life, but I also love it in the business life also, because we've done it and there's good reasons for it. Like, you have a long process, you have a problem at one operation, you're like, we should automate this. And George and his team of 10 are like, we got it. And they could nail that. And we stand back and be like, we solved that problem. And that was maybe the right thing to do at the time, but it wasn't a holistic solution, or wasn't a step towards the holistic solution that we're getting better at developing over time. And that's kind of what they found. They also found that the more that's automated and the more data becomes available to grab, a lot of data is being collected, but not a lot of it's actually being utilized as well as it could, as efficiently as it could.
So I just want to step in real quick. Sorry, Top. So one advantage that we have, is this engineering team that's dedicated to automation, and we get started early on in the process. And the way that we approach this is we do look at that end. We have not implemented an automated system that does not look ahead 2 or 3 systems, so that we're able to adapt what we're doing today, knowing where we need to go in the future, and how we can bring this single point piece of automation into this holistic system to be able to get that quality on-time part out at the end. So it's an advantage having that in-house team that knows and understands not only the product, but understands what our customers' important aspects are for each one of those devices and that product that we're putting out. So it really helps the team to be able to focus and collaborate along the entire process for that part to be able to help the end result. So
yeah, and that's That's a great add because you can buy solutions, and sometimes that's the right thing to do. You can buy a turnkey solution for one opportunity or one step in the process, but when it's in-house, you're looking at it normally more holistically than that.
Folks have a great perspective on the industry at large. Which category would the majority of the OEMs sort of fall?
As far as like the stages of
Yeah.
automation, I think it's a mix based on size, scale, the product, how stable it is. A lot of times I think I've seen in the past we've got contract manufacturing and then I also have OEM manufacturing. I'd say it's spotty. We have a problem, we're going to solve that with a robot or automated system. And other times it is very cellular. You're going to look at it from start to finish. So probably a mix based on the application.
I think personally what I've discovered is what happens is no follow through with that. So we look at an individual process or a cell even, and we're like, okay, we've got the ROI, we've got the volumes, we know we can do this, we put that in place, and then we turn our attention to the next one. And we don't come back to finalize that analysis of what did we just put in and what changed dynamically in there. Because as much as all of us would love to design the perfect piece of automation, there are things that interrupt that perfect process. So I think a lot of it is revisiting that with our production teams that we have in our facilities and with maintenance. Where are your pain points? We put this in now and everything runs great for the first year on your piece of equipment, your piece of automation. But what happens when it starts to break down? What happens when it needs that maintenance? Are we performing those things? So again, not only is it a great collaboration to have with our customer to understand that process, we need to internally have communication and discussions with our internal teams so that we can roll this out holistically so that everyone understands their role and where that needs to be to keep that automation in that prime shape.
Yeah, and I think, George, that's a great point with partnership because that's how I viewed, the development work we did with your team. And in particular, I think there's not always a recognition too, implementing automation and the cost, the capital investment, because sometimes you go to manufacturers and they'll go, to level 11 right out of the gates. And it's I have to absorb that depreciated cost so that is so while you're giving me a part that may be 20% cheaper than more the manual version in the early days, I still have to absorb all that capital investment, right? And so I don't know if that's how many manufacturers understand that, but that's where the capital investment really becomes a pain point. In most cases, in med device, we're not talking about millions and millions of components a year. It's in the tens and the hundreds of thousands, right? So sometimes those capital investments can be pretty significant.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So where does this lead us, right? So where are we? We've got some of these systems that are connected together. We're really trying to optimize what we do next. So now let's talk about Industry 4.0, right? So where are we with that? Do we really understand what Industry 4.0 is and how it can really benefit us as suppliers and customers and everyone along that chain? So it's all about data, right? How do we absorb that data and move that in? We've got our automated system. We've got our connectivity now. Now we've got this massive data that you can get from these machines, no matter what type of machine or process you have. Now, how are we going to really take that and implement that in so that I can truly optimize and make my systems intelligent to help that entire process? So the key is automate, connect, analyze, and the biggest piece is react. And we'll get into all those components much deeper as we keep going here. So now we're going to look at how do we unpack Industry 4.0, right? We talked about those first three phases. Sorry, it did jump. I must have went back. Sorry about that. New technology, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's my fat finger. Anyway, so we talked about those first three, right? It implements an automated cell. We've got it humming along. Now we really need to take that information that's going to be in there, whether we connect to it or not, that information's there. So why not take that free information and put it to use? So that's where we start into Industry 4.0. And I will let the team take over from here.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, when you talk about Industry 4.0, one of the first things, so, as I go to these different manufacturing facilities over, the 20 plus years I've been at Med Device, there's all these different buzzwords over the years that have been thrown out, right? So like I go through one facility, like, oh, we're vertically integrated. Well, what does that mean for me, the customer, right? And, statistical process control, SPC, so all these things are tools, right? And it's about how you're using it. And so that's always been the question for me is just like, how does that translate to value for me as a customer versus it's just a buzzword that the industry is using, right? And that's what I'm looking for when I go in and evaluate suppliers, in regards to this stuff.
Exactly. So again, that data is there. So what do we do with that data? And there is a definite progression for how you bring that data in and how you develop, that scope of that project alone. That's a massive project. We have hundreds of machines individually at each one of our sites across the U.S. So how do we bring all those groups in to understand what that data need is at each one of those groups? Maintenance, quality, production planning. So now we can take that data as we're developing this, and we have developed our own OEE system internally. There are a lot of companies out there that have been around for quite a while, and the new wave now is for them to come in and produce this OEE system for you that comes at a subscription rate. So, it costs everything. But we do this internally. We've developed our own that we're able to take this data and roll that into our ERP system and MES system, right? So production planning has a firsthand analysis of this. Our manufacturing engineers within our facilities, they can start looking at this data, analyzing the optimization of those machines. What's my downtime look? Where are my most breakdowns? How can I implement this into my system? So it's a huge benefit and a huge initiative to take this on. It's not something that you want to just whip right through and go to that, as Adam explained, level 11 right away, because we have to be able to build that system and those people to be able to analyze that information and do the right reactive plan past that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like that capability's there, and you could put it. I think we were prepping through this, and I think Adam called it like resume fodder. Like you can just we do this, we have OEE, and think sometimes you'll get something that's pitched to you and like OEE will save you X number of dollars, and like no, it won't. The monitoring won't save you anything. It maybe looks good or it's pretty, but until you use that information, it's not really doing anything. And we've fallen in that trap. We've had systems set up. George's team has set it up. And like, what are we doing with this bit of information? It's like, well, we know it's not where it was supposed to be. And then we go talk to planning. Like, hey, planning planned it 85% OEE, and we were only demonstrating 76%. It's like, hey, planning, what are you planning next week for? 85. Like, probably shouldn't. Right? It needs to be 76. Yeah. That's how we're going to get the delivery there. So if they're not connected, you can have all the systems, you can have all the data, but we're not actually going to improve off of that until you face the reality of, say, we're at 76, here's our action plans, here's where we're going to improve over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. We have to be connected with those, or it just becomes something that we can talk about having, but we're not actually getting the benefit from it in the same way.
Exactly. So it's a journey. We're not there yet. I'm not up here to say we've got the perfect solution. We've got the perfect answer. We've got perfect optimization through all of our systems and everything. But we've got that end goal in mind. We've got that plan that we've put in place. We've implemented it. But we know as well as the next person that that's a dynamic plan. Again, it's that loop, right? It's that follow through and around, right? So you end up with what we might call the Industry 4.0 circle of life, right? So you've got the data there, you've got the connectivity. Now, do you have the people in place to analyze it? Do you have the people in place to put in the right solutions and the right reactions to that within that loop? So it's continuous. Eventually, where we want to get to again is this AI connectivity, where we can take some of this data and we can have the machine itself make adjustments, send out emails to us when the temperature on my spindle within my robo drill is getting too much. We know there's something going on there. So we have those capabilities. All of us have those capabilities. We just have to be able to harness that information and make the right actions based off of that. Thoughts on that, Adam?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I unpacked this slide for myself, and reviewed it, like the two things that stuck out to me as a customer more so than the others, because some of the stuff is beyond my understanding of automation, which is limited. But like the feedback loop, right? So that to me talks to like continuous improvement, and obviously as a device manufacturer, we're always trying to achieve continuous improvement. So to your point, it's a constant feedback and evolution. So that resonates with me and it makes sense. And then the action plan, so then it's ultimately like, okay, with this data, you're coming to me, the manufacturer, like I have an opportunity that I want to discuss potentially that, here's an investment and this will get us to that future state goal that you've shared with us as far as forecasting or whatever. And so then we can start evaluating like how much time would it take to validate or implement, when would we see a return on that investment, and if it makes sense ultimately for us right now or not. So.
Right.
And that,
Go ahead.
sorry, no, I was just thinking through the components and how that affects customers, how that affects us. And I would look at each one of these components and look at it as in terms of if we have the information feeding that, what are we doing with it? And on this one, you'll see like action plans, and Adam talked about that too. And that's how I would look at it. If we have information that's shared, but we're not using that for something, or we have downtime or efficiencies or maintenance, unscheduled maintenance, it's like if it's red in 1 month, I would want to know what are the action plans, who's owning it, what are they doing about it. And if they do those actions and it's still red a month later, it's like, why is it still red? Why are we still struggling with that? Like that, something that plan, do, study, act loop is probably broken there if we're not going back to it. And so the connectivity can be there, the information can be there, but if the ownership for the people that are using it isn't tied into that and committed to it, we could still slip. And when it is working, it works great. And it also gives us that information for those conversations of, hey, we're struggling with this, we want to improve it. Like, how big of a problem is it? It's like, well, it's difficult. That's different than saying, here's the evidence. Here's how many times we've had this issue or the productivity or inspection or whatever that is to work together to actually quantify the thing that we're trying to improve or fix.
So it's like buying the $1,000 toolbox that you have and you still don't have the right tools. You got every tool in the toolbox, but which one do I really need? Do I have that computer that I can connect to my car to really tell me what's wrong? So again, data. It's all just a tool that we can use.
Adam, from Teleflex's perspective, when you see those components, which ones impact you or benefit you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the communication around the action plans, honestly, I mean, I think that we're then discussing the benefits of all these different aspects of Industry 4.0. But to Dan's point, when you can put it on the table and say, this is what's happening, and here there are ideas to approach that, that's where it becomes the most powerful, because, again, I always question, like, is what the supplier's telling me makes sense? Or is it just like they're, oh, we're not hitting this because of X, Y, and Z. I always look for, like, does that actually, like, logically make sense? And so having data obviously makes that conversation easier.
Absolutely. So we talked about the data, right? So how do we gather that data, right? There's 3 stages to this. And the easiest and most primal of the foundation is the connectivity of those machines, right? So we can connect to each one of those machines, gather that data, use all the devices that we need to pull that in. Then how do we move that data into where the organization can use it? So now we've got this networking aspect. So now there's a collaboration between the automation team and the IT network and your IT department to be able to help us implement these into reasonable data capturing systems, whatever that program may be of what you would ultimately use. So that's phase 2. Then phase 3 gets to the reporting aspect, right? How does the CNC department within the facility need that data to be able to make those actionable items and get that reporting to them? So again, this is a growing learning aspect of what we've done within our facilities. We've gone through an enormous amount of learning curve to get the right data there, to display that for them in a real-time world so that they can react from the floor in a maintenance way. Now we can produce the data to them in a summary, however they want it, daily, hourly, monthly, that tells them what's the most breakdowns I've had. That then in turn rolls back to my team potentially and says, look, 33% of our breakdown time equaled, 5,400 hours over the last 6 months. And it's all attested to, the fixturing within the device, within that machine itself. So how can we look at that as a continuous improvement and do this? The team that I manage in our facilities, we walk the floor on at least a weekly basis and have discussions with our production planning and with our maintenance teams and go, where are the pain points? Where can we help and real step back and take a real analysis of what's going on, and how can we use that data then to be able to produce those results to get us a continuous improvement? And then with these data reporting systems, we now can see that, over a week or a month that, what we did was real-time change. It really improved our OEE and where we were able to output this.
To which category would create the most opportunity for failure, and which one would perhaps generate the most success?
Well, that's a great question, Tom. I'll tell you that, because each one of these entities obviously has their own challenges. And I will tell you, to go deeper into that question, the easiest part is connecting everything. Connecting it, grabbing the data from it, and have it sitting there. It's like you've got that great new Dodge Challenger sitting there in the driveway, and you're just revving that motor up really good, and it's really ready to go. But, your 16-year-old can't figure out how to even put it in drive to make it move.
Don't give them the keys.
So I think the biggest pain point is taking that data and being able to analyze it to be able to make those actionable items. Those are the keys right there, is having that infrastructure and those people to be able to analyze that data and what to move next within that. So what does that look like for our customer?
Yeah, perfect. Because it kind of circles back to like doing all that work is a lot of hard work, a lot of good accomplishments, but it's really what are the end results of that, and what does it ultimately mean to the customer? So we'll kick that off to Adam and hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a lot simpler from a customer perspective. We don't have to figure out all solving all the problems, But, from a customer perspective, the most important thing is, what's the component going to cost? Again, I talked about earlier, like depending on the criticality of the component, I know I'm going to have to make more investments with certain components versus other components. So again, the component that Vantedge makes for Teleflex is an extremely high precision part. And so we knew we would have to invest in making sure that part comes out consistently every time. So cost is obviously the biggest question. And again, I mentioned before, like it's not just cost of the component, but the capital investment. And then time and quality are the other two big ones, right? So, and I think that's one of the interesting things when you talk about this stepwise process, starting at manual and then obviously working your way up. I know that from my perspective, especially when you start working with a new vendor or supplier on a new component, one of the biggest, like the hardest things as an engineer is to deal with the like, yeah, I'll get you your first parts in 16 weeks. And I'm like, I don't even know if it works yet. Like waiting 16 weeks for this part. That's where like this creative approach of like, starting but it is really just like, you're doing the same thing on a manufacturing level that we're doing with the product itself, right? We're learning and evolving and then scaling. And so a lot of times when you come into a supplier, it's oftentimes at the end where it's like, this is my part, quote the final part. And it's like, well, if we put fiducials over here, I could do a vision system on this part, and like none of that's incorporated in, right?
Right.
So I think it is important. And then there's also some suppliers that like, they don't have the capabilities to span all these steps in Industry 4.0, right? So if I have one that can only handle step 1 and 2, now I'm going to start over to some extent once I get to the volumes that I can now move to another vendor. So.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you want parts right away, quick, because you don't know yet, and we're trying to quote and think of it in terms of what's year 3 look like. Because we get your parts quick, but we can't scale, then you have a different failure mode. It's just further down the road. So working with customers, especially with like Adam, who's got that knowledge of manufacturing behind him and that vision, becomes much, much easier, much simpler, especially early on at the quoting phase where we're quoting it, but we're looking at DFM, not just for how do we make this thing today or now, but it's how do we make this in year 2, year 3 when the volumes are high. So that automation team in-house that we can pull in and look at those things to say, All right, George, we know we got to get prototypes out quick. That's over here. This team's going to nail that. But while we're quoting it, we want to give them that pricing and what we think year 2 is and what we think year 3 is and where the capital flows into that and what the optimized solution looks like. So we kind of do all that initially, and the partnership is kind of point of view for us very, very imperative. We have a system called First Step, which just kind of connects all those dots and that vision. We can kick that off and have that. It's more than just do a prototype. It's how do you build it out and how do you partner with them through that whole life cycle of it and get that information flowing. And then long-term delivery, it's where's the rest of the systems? Because this is one tool in the toolbox. Like how do you automate? How do you do 4.0? It's like, well, you can do all that and still fail epically down the road if you don't have a good S&OP process and the supply chain's connected as well. Okay, so we talked about all that. Is 4.0 worth it? And you'd be like, yes. I thought the audience was going to cheer. They'd be like, yes, we're convinced. And, like, is it worth it? I don't know. Sometimes in the right time, absolutely. And other times it's probably not. What are some key factors there? Everything that everybody probably would think of or come up. Like, is it high volume? It's probably more worth it. Do you have a ton of different SKUs and there's a high mix, low volume? It's probably not as worth it to go all the way and have all that connectivity, at least through the whole scope of those things. Big thing is visibility and future demand. And so when you're sitting down and a new product, they've got a marketing go live strategy and a rollout strategy. It's like, we're going to look at that and see. And like we might say year 1, it doesn't make sense. Year 2, it certainly does. So here's how we're going to build it out and have that all come into play. Other considerations, optimize then automate. I don't know if anybody saw the Elon Musk interview where he was talking about the Tesla factory that they launched. And they, right off the gate, they're like, we are going to go as much automation as we possibly can. And by the end of month 2, they were ripping robots out. He's like, yeah, we had robots pulled out, sitting in the parking lot. And his takeaway was, don't automate the thing that's not optimized. You can automate a whole bunch of waste when you don't know what you're doing yet. And we'd love to say we know what we're doing, and oftentimes we don't. Month 1, we're not going to have it figured out. Another interview in SpaceX, he's like, don't optimize the thing that shouldn't exist in the first place. He's like, a lot of engineers, really smart engineers, make the mistake of optimizing the thing that shouldn't be there. And if you look at like their Falcon robots over time, they get much, much simpler, which sometimes we complicate stuff as we go. And so I think about that a lot of how we choose to automate. When we choose to automate, you're going to learn so much off the first, maybe it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And then you start automating that when you have more stability in your system. That's one consideration I would say. I would say utilizing consistent systems. You talk about everybody, back to the skill gap. There's skill gaps in maintenance techs also. So when George and his team try to solidify with certain robots, certain controls, certain motions, it's easier from a development, it's easier from a training, spare parts, and then future flexibility. It's probably the is it worth it? Sometimes. It's good to at least have it in mind.
Sometimes. It's an end goal. But as you walk through that maturity in that process, you find out where it can best be implemented and how to best use that, not just going to level 11 right away. Level 11 may be in that thought process, but let's start out at 1 and then maybe 1.5, and we'll get to 11 eventually.
Okay, so this is an example of
In a minute.
typical process. Suspense is building. Very typical for products that we make, maybe. It goes through CNC machining, assembly, and weld. There we go.
Sorry.
Part marking, curing, inspection, packaging. So just take a typical product that we would make MedTech for a lot of ones. And this follows some of the Teleflex stuff as well in a shortened version of it. And we'd love to say we have a process like this. We quote it. We're good at all this stuff. And we know exactly how it's going to end. And we're going to automate it right out of the gate. And we don't normally do that, because we don't know exactly what that process is going to look like. And even if we did, the CapEx investment to hit that right off the gate would be so high, the investment wouldn't be worth it, and the unknowns would be pretty high from a risk standpoint. So how would we walk through that? And I'll hit a couple of these and turn it over to George to talk through what optimized would look like. Kind of that begin with the end in mind approach would be like CNC machining. we might start manually load and unload, like one person, 2 machines, 3 machines, 4 machines, whatever that cycle time is. But we know where we're going to end up. We know what the improved state's going to be. We know what optimized is going to be. So we're going to build things in like part probe, broken tool detections, redundant tooling, et cetera. So it's still manual in the sense of a person running a machine, but we're still going to use palletized. We're still going to use bar fed. You're still going to strive for lights out, but you're not going to go full automated cell right out of the gate. From an improved standpoint, though, it might be robot now loading and unloading that machine, but it's still kind of operating by itself. And then fully optimized might then incorporate that robot taking the part, going through a cleaning op, then going through an inspection, feeding that inspection data right back into the machine. So you're now running an optimized state for that one piece of equipment, that first step. If you take the next 3, maybe it's assemble and weld, part marking, coding, probably going to start very manual for the most part. However, if it's a weld operation, you might decide right out of the gate, like, yeah, I'm not going to do manual weld. Like, why not? How many people have sat in the front room with the FDA investigators? Anybody had that pleasure? Oh, hey, one person in the back.
Two.
Yeah, 2, perfect. Have you had the opportunity to talk about special processes with them? Yeah, it's a blast. Welding, manual welding. If no one's done that, it feels like 3 or 4 days straight talking about over and over manual welding. And while went through it with no issues, no findings, it was a real struggle. And it's a manual process. And as good as the skilled welders are and as many controls as you put in there, it is way easier and more robust from a quality standpoint to have something that you automate. You have DOEs that back it up. We can discuss them. We can go through them. You have validations that you can do and execute. And you know that automation and the output of that and the monitoring that gives you that peace of mind and defendable data points worth doing right out of the gate. So that's one of those that we might say, we're gonna do the laser weld right out of the gate. We still may load and unload manually to start off with, but that automation is worth it from that perspective to put that quality first kind of mentality and investment behind it. Then you might progress for any one of those to be kind of a cobot, robot tended, semi-automated, and then we'd move to the optimized kind of cellular approach, which George can talk about the applications of that his team's done multiple times.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are real world examples that we're talking about. We have implemented these, in a growing type of state, when we started out. But one thing I will point out is, yes, we might start out with laser welding. Perfect, that's great. No matter the process, we bring our team in at that foundation so that we can look at how can I make that transition from manual or semi-assisted automation in there to a full automated system so that that transition of capital investment is minimized. And most importantly for our customer, the timeline, because we've got to now integrate full automation into that machine. What's going to happen to my production on that machine while I'm fully automating it? So we look at these aspects right away so that we can make that step much faster, much simpler, much cheaper once we move to that and we get to that optimized state there. Optimized now taking that data, excuse me, and using that data back into the machine so it can make its own adjustments as we're doing these fine line inspections on these critical parts so that the operator doesn't have to fat finger the number that you just put in and now we've got a scrap part. So we're able to take all that data and feed that from one system into the other so that now we produce that quality part every time based on that previous operation and prep it for the next one. So that's that Industry 4.0 and where are we taking it within our processes. Do we have that 100%? No, we do not. But again, we've got the plan and the format to be able to roll those in as they're needed, as our customer needs them. We have that in our ability to do that. And the standardization has been from the start. When we were deployed to be able to make these advanced manufacturing facilities throughout all of Vantedge, now we've got that internal standardization. We also have developed our own internal training programs that we roll out to all of the sites within their tech support so that there's this collaboration that starts from one site to the next to where we can even go online with our systems that are all the way across the country and be able to diagnose that problem with that person on the other end of the line in California and say, no, this is what I'm seeing real time in the PLC. So we've taken it to that level to be able to provide that support across all of the Vantedge sites. See if I can get the clicker to work. Haha, there we go. So what have we learned while implementing 4.0? Because it wasn't this vast knowledge that I went out and I found all of this, and not without a lot of research. So like with everything, it's trial and error, right? So we put these best plans into play, but there's a lot of hiccups that come along the way. So I'll let Dan talk about some of that for us.
Okay, I'll talk about the hiccups then. I would say a lot of it is just, it's a trial and error, very much so. Just the plan do, like what went wrong, did it actually work, and then adjust from there. We failed a lot of different ways. Like we've definitely had places to where we're outputting one source of data that matters to one group, but not the group that's supposed to be using it. Example of that is a lot of times we'll like OEE, and we're like, where's your efficiency at? And like engineers want to look at that. We want to drive it, and production does. But what does the customer really care about? What does planning really care about? Like, where are my parts? It's like, oh, one system's talking in percentage, and the other people care about parts. It's like, hey, we ran at 85%. Like, great, can I ship my 5,000 parts this week? Like, yeah, we ran the wrong 5,000 parts, or whatever that happens to be. And so understanding what we're outputting, making sure it's used by the second group is a big thing. I would say we've had automation systems that they're not faulted out, or they're doing rechecks. It's like uptime looks good, but output isn't there. Ran not to dispatch list. So output from a part count is there, but it's not following the ship schedule. So that connectivity of what each system needs and the visibility of it is something that it takes some trial and errors. And I would say that in-house automation team helps with that. So if you did a turnkey, and then you find out later that's not exactly what I wanted, and you want to go change that or tweak it, there's more hurdles or another PO or whatever that happens to be. But I don't know, anything else you would add to that?
I think the downtime codes too, right? You've got this specific set of actionable items that happen, within a process, and we're given this list of, hey, listen, here's the 17 things that we know that happen, and then they're not the things that happen commonly, and then you've got this mystery of, why was the machine down? I don't know. They just keep selecting other when it says downtime. So that doesn't give me a lot to be able to react from. So it's really honing in and working with the people on the floor that make the difference. I think all of us in here know that if we're really going to create actionable items, it's going to be with the people on the floor. They're the ones that are going to help us understand what's going on with that equipment. And what we really need to do as an engineering and an executive team to be able to fix these issues to get those parts where they need to be.
Adam, how about you? I feel like everyone's being open about their challenges and their failures. What have you been part of, or what have you maybe have seen other people have challenges with?
Yeah, I mean, less specifically with Industry 4.0, but just in general, like, it's always painful living through the delays as the learnings happen, right? And again, that's where becoming a partner up front becomes very important. So it's kind of like, sometimes it's not a surprise, right? We're like, well, I know the team was struggling with this, and sometimes like, can you get me 100 parts? I know I ordered 1,000, but can I get 100? But usually, I mean, we're usually waiting for parts to do a build to further progress the design and get to regulatory clearance. So that's usually the toughest thing to deal with. But again, like, it's all about having that partnership. So it's not a surprise, or as much of a surprise. It's more of like, dang, I wish that didn't happen.
And it's how you navigate the not perfect. It's like, we thought it was going to be 1,000, but we know what you need, so we're going to do this the hard way and build them for you to meet that need, and while we fix it.
Do you really say dang? Or is that panel talk? Yeah.
Other words.
So where are we headed next? What's the next piece look like? What is looking ahead? What's next? Industry 5.0? Sure, that's exactly the buzzword that Europe is deploying right now. So what does 5.0 mean? Means, believe it or not, we're bringing the people back into it, because what's missing when you've got all this autonomous operation and all this data that's coming in there, it's the data that exists on the floor, whether that's tribal knowledge or whether that's, well, that's the way we've always done it. I've always had to do X, Y, Z in this process, and that's just what my job is. I've always done that, but yet no one in production planning, no one in maintenance knew that piece was built into that time cycle or that part of the process. So now we want to bring those people back into it. So there was a good article on LinkedIn actually describing just this, that we've got an individual that's made these machines run for 32 years, and guess what? Joe's retiring next month. What's going to happen when Joe's not here anymore and we don't have that? So it's reintroducing, taking all this data and now bringing the human aspect back into it. And again, connecting with those people on the floor that really make these machines and this process work for us. We can implement, again, all the automation and all the perfect processes that we want. It all looks great on paper. Adam and we had a discussion about that last night. My part looks perfect on paper. I don't know why you can't produce it. Well, there's a lot of items that happen, within that process when you actually start making a part. So that's one example I wanted to go with. The second one, real quick, was there was another article on LinkedIn that stated, we built this perfect, intelligent, automated factory from the start, greenfield. It's a true article. You can look it up. I'm not going to name who said it. Now what are they doing? They're looking for the people to be able to take that data and make those actionable items. So it's two pieces to this puzzle. One's having all the data, which is sitting there. Now we got to find the people that are really going to roll forward with it. So.
All right. Great. So we have time for questions.